Hello and welcome to another episode of an Unexpected Podcast. My name is Tim, and with me as always we have Matt, Rainier, and Evan. On this week's episode, we're going to be going over the new book that just released, The Fall of the Necromancer, as well as going over a list by Boris Mitshev. I'm going to put Boris's list on screen now, but before we do that, actually, as a reminder, we do have a Facebook group now, so if you're interested in joining us there, as well as we post on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you prefer to just listen to the episode rather than watching. So just as a reminder for that. But this is Boris's list. It is the twins. It doesn't say with anything else. I'm just assuming they're plain. One elf with banner and spear, three elves with bow, two elves with spear and shield, one knight with shield, Aristor, who's the leader, he says. Three elves, two elves with bow, three elves with spear and shield, one knight with shield, and then Círdan with two elves with bow, and two elves with spear and shield. 28 models, 8 bows. It is a 650 point list, and it's going to be a good versus evil tournament. And he would like to bring pure Rivendell. He says he hasn't had much success with them yet due to the low model count, and this is the best he was able to come up with. The good thing is it's lower points, so the twins will be very good. You have to wonder why no horses at the minimum. I know it's 20 points, but those two on horses at 650, I feel like would just be devastating at that point. But maybe with the new thing with horses and not wanting to be attacked, but 650 with no magic usually, or very low amounts of magic, you wouldn't really have to worry about that, especially with Círdan's blinding light. You wouldn't have to worry about shooting either. It has 6. Aristar has 2 might in the new edition, correct? Mm-hmm. So 8, and then Círdan has 1. So 9 might, so good amount of might. I'm tempted to maybe drop 1 or 2 models, make sure there's shields on the front rank at least, so then that way you at least have some form of defense sticks. I don't know why you put the shields on the elves with spear, because if you're just going to keep them in the back, at least put the shields on the ones with...
Well, I would like to offer an explanation, which is this is how the elves come in the boxes.
Oh, he's going as boxes.
They come spears, shields, normal swords, and then bows. And unfortunately, I'm just adding on to your point here, Tim, due to the way low model count armies play, they like to be very cohesive. They like their things to be able to work together. They want a lot of spears. They want a lot of shields to make them as high defense as they possibly can be. So unfortunately, the way you're going to get the best out of these elves is if everybody's got shields in the front. If your bowmen have spears so they can shoot, and then once they get into combat, their lower defense can spear support the elves with higher defense. And unfortunately, if you want to run them this way, you either have to do some sort of proxy thing or do a lot of converting, which actually with high elves isn't atrociously bad. It's not easy, but I've seen it done.
By me.
Yes. Well, I've also seen it done by a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, if your twins do not have horses and do not have the heavy armor, give them the heavy armor. I haven't had the time to do the math on this list to see whether he just forgot to include the heavy armor and the horse in the list, or if he did not pay the points for him. But drop a couple of elves if you have to. Take the heavy armor. Take the horses. Because despite the fact that you get +1 attack on the ground, the horses, with their increased damage output, is just so drastic that you're going to want that. Other than that, I don't think the heroes need any changing. Obviously, there are alternate ways to run this list, but I don't think they're necessarily better. But I'd say if you can, do your best to try and change the war gear on these elves. If you can, give the bowmen spears. If you can, maybe convert shields on the backs of some of the blademen. in order to give them that front rank defense 6, and that sort of thing. Also, double checking just the bow limit here. I think it's pretty good, actually.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
think it's
think the bow
8.
limit is correct. Yeah. So that's fine.
Okay. Rainier, any thoughts?
Oh, just the same thing. Switching the spears with the shields around. Yeah, I don't see much change that I would do. Just I think the army bonus rule is you re-roll shoots around the leader, right? For Rivendell. If you don't move.
If you don't move with yes, then
Yes, I might consider putting the twins bows in Aristor's warband, but besides that, like I don't see much difference. Of course, mount the twins. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would put heavy armor on the twins to save points, but Evan makes a good case for that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious how it'll do against pure evil armies too, because it's a good versus evil. He also says the scenarios are going to be randomly drawn, so it depends on what scenario is going to be played. So we'll see.
So, all right. All right. So obviously, I also agree with the give the spears to the guys with bows. And I went through after dealing with this for a while and got frustrated with elves and just went through and bought a box of elves, chopped them up. They're not that hard to kind of rejigger, and put them back together in a usable format. So we've got elves with bows and spears, and we've got elves with swords and shields. And that's the way to do it. But if you have to do it this way, you have to do it this way. I'm not sure that's the biggest concern I have with the list. I think the biggest concern I have with the list is the twins, who I think are too expensive for a 650 point list. Does anybody else agree with me on that? I mean, if you kit these guys out, even with just the heavy armor and the horses, they're 190 points.
yeah. So okay, so who would your alternative be? Like a captain on horse with?
I mean, if you're gonna go up that high, I mean, how much is Glorfindel?
Glorfindel's like 20 points less.
Yeah, so
The
on
concern-
fully kitted out, he's 170.
Yeah.
The concern with that is you have 6 might, one of which is probably going to be some sort of channel or spell with Círdan, and the rest you want to use. Glorfindel obviously doesn't want to spend any of his might except in combats, so you're basically leaning on Aristor to call all of your heroic moves and stuff like that. I think actually this is one of the points levels where I'd say the twins are most preferable over not Aristor, over Glorfindel or something like that. Just because it gets you those extra might points. Because usually Rivendell relies on Boromir of Gondor to give it that sort of might boost that it needs. And he's already stated that he has no interest in allying with Rivendell. He wants to use pure Rivendell. So I think in order to get those extra might points, I think the twins are probably the correct choice here.
Yeah, I'd probably fall under Evan's camp a little more too, because I'm a huge fan of the twins, but I always get frustrated when they come against defense 7 and they can't kill stuff. But I think going against pure evil armies, you're going to come against a lot of D6, a lot of fallen realms that are D4, D5, and you'll have the opportunity to double heroic combat with them. I like that there are 2 knights also, so you get that killing power with the lance kind of coupled in with them. So I don't know. I think I would keep them also. It's a good consider though to take them out, but I think the 6 might again kind of takes it over.
Yeah, sort of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Tim, stay in your place.
This is my time, okay? I'm kind of so Glorfindel with armor is 160. The twins as are 160. So in order to give Glorfindel's horse, which I think we all would agree to give him his horse, that's another 10 points. If you wanted to give the twins horses, it's 20 points, so 180. So the question is, they're very similar in points. So you'd lose one model probably to add the horses to the twins if you didn't want to add armor. If you wanted to add armor, I think that's another 20 points. So there's
But you'd have to lose a knight to give the horses to the twins.
So 20 points.
Which, by the way, I think you definitely want to do.
Yeah. So, well, the difference, so the twins are 180 with horses and no armor. They're 190 with armor because they already have normal armor and they're going to heavy armor. And remember, the twins are 2 models, Glorfindel is 1. So if you want to take them on horses with heavy armor, you'd have to drop 1 model.
I think
net.
because it's good versus evil, that affects this. I think that's the biggest thing about it. And I think good versus evil, I'd rather have 2 twins if they were on horse than Glorfindel. But I would say if they're on ground, I'd probably prefer Glorfindel.
So I think a good versus evil. If I was good versus evil, I'd want 1 Glorfindel on Asphaleth rather than 2 twins who are going to get black darted off of both of their horses 2 or 3 turns into the game.
Yeah.
Well, at 650, how many times? I get that it's good versus evil, so you will see ring wraiths. That's not deniable. But I just wonder at 650 how prevalent you think they're going to be. So
I'm pretty sure in good versus evil, you're going to see at least one ring wraith on the other side, and that ring wraith is going to be doing little else but black darting horses for the first couple turns of the game until your 20 points of horses are gone. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, doesn't Armor of Gondolin give Glorfindel like resistance to magic too?
well, he gives them two free dice. Two free dice.
It counts as Fortify Spirit being cast on him.
It's a good.
I get your point. It's a good point. So he has 28 models at this point. Assuming that he added horses, he's down to 27. I just wonder if with just Glorfindel, you have enough killing power there. And that's my biggest concern, because obviously Círdan has the Aura of Dismay to keep anything that doesn't have courage away a little bit. Aristor has the re-rolling to kind of help out in that regard, but I don't know that there's enough killing power without the twins is my concern.
I don't know, maybe not. I mean, Glorfindel's got a heck of a lot of killing power, especially since he's.
But he can only kill,
7.
let's say, 2 models if he calls
them. But the twins are easier to shut down, right?
They are.
There are 2 of them, but each one of them is easier to shut down, and each one of them has less killing power because they have 1 less attack and they aren't the Lord of the West.
That's true.
So, I don't actually know who does more damage, Glorfindel or the twins. I think Evan's right that the big advantage of the twins is you get 6 might rather than 3.
And that's at this, if you go without the twins, you're at 6 might. And we've discussed this before when we talk about Rivendell. One of their biggest issues is always their might points along with their numbers. And I think that 9 might points, you can confidently take a couple of heroic combats into case, or if you need to call more heroic strikes or moves, you have that ability. But I will agree that Glorfindel is a much better suited person to kind of deal with evil. I just think that the twins can offer more killing power, in my view, in a 650 point list.
Yeah, I definitely, I think I agree with Tim in that area. First, as a disclaimer, I am not saying that the twins are good. They are, by definition, an overcosted model compared to many other models that you can very easily ally into Rivendell, such as Boromir of Gondor, Legolas, all those sorts of models that give you more bang for your buck. For example, allying in Boromir and Legolas or something like that for very few more points just gives you so much more mileage in basically every area. However, I think under this specific set of constraints, where he's not going to ally in Boromir or Legolas, and you're at so low points that there's no way to really buff up your might points, I think the twins are the most effective choice here.
Okay, so Matt's saying Glorfindel, Evan and I are saying twins. Rainier, where do you land on this?
I'd still probably, just based off my play style, I think I'd fall under twins because like Glorfindel, I don't know, they're all strength 4 anyways, and they all can get blade, the special blade thing with Kurdan. So I would still take the 2 over the 1, just for play style. But I think Matt makes really good points, and I think strategically it's a 50-50. It's a toss up.
I find it very difficult because, like, how do you not want Glorfindel on your list, right? Like, how do you not want that kind of person in your list?
So I think part of the answer on my case comes off of what your evil meta is. If your evil meta is a bunch of ring wraiths, I think you take Glorfindel. If your evil meta is a bunch of hunter orcs, then I think you're right. You take the twins. So because you want that might to be able to get the heroic moves.
That's a
So
good point.
I guess I'll put a Glorfindel question mark on me, because I think there's, if you're fighting ring wraiths, I think you want Glorfindel. If you're just fighting, orcs without ring wraiths, then I think you're probably better off with the twins. I agree with that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny though, because like the new Witch King model just came out, so there's your ring wraith, and then the new Legion of Azog came out, so they're your hunter orcs. So
Right.
it's like you're gonna be screwed anyways.
Although, interestingly enough, I don't think this particular list gives a damn about the new. Well, okay, I will say this. I think you definitely want Glorfindel if you're fighting the new Dol Guldur Legendary Legion.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Because you want to counter. You want somebody who doesn't need to strike up against Azog, and we'll beat him on 3-up. But this list, this list doesn't really care that much about the other benefits that Legendary Legion brings, because it has no offensive magic. All its magic is stuff that can cast on other elves, and some of that is enchanting blades and stuff like that. But it's not like anybody's going to be resisting his spells.
Okay. Thank you, Boris, for your list. I think we're kind of in agreement where maybe move some spears around, maybe move some shields around as well. And then I think go based on what Matt said, and depending on what the meta is in your area for evil, make that decision on whether or not you want the twins or Glorfindel. But we definitely recommend putting them on horses at least. Maybe drop one knight in order to do that, so at least they can get a level 7 power.
You're better off with 2 twins on horses than 2 twins on foot and 1 knight.
Even though it's 20 points, and I know with the like you said in the comment that everything's expensive and it's low model count, it is more worth it to have them on horse than the 1 extra knight. But let us know how you do in the tournament. I'm always curious to hear when people say that they're going to a tournament and they're looking for a list review to see how they did in that tournament. We're going to move into the main topic for today, which is the new book release, The Fall of Necromancer. So I'll ask everyone before we get into the actual Legendary Legions, what is it you're most excited about model-wise that came out? Whether that be, I guess I shouldn't say model-wise. It could be the new dice. It could be the new terrain pieces. It could be, even though I know that they've released the Spider Queen, actually, and stuff like that, along with the supplement. So what is everyone most excited about that just got released?
So I know I am most excited about the Dol Guldur terrain pieces, because I think that's going to be really fun to build a board out of. I think that's going to be a really fun board to build just for a general board, and then you can turn it around and kind of take all the pieces, scrunch them together, and make just kind of like a Dol Guldur, a nice cinematic Dol Guldur 2x2 to do the actual vanquishing of the Necromancer scenario on. I think that's going to be a really fun set of toys to play with.
Yeah, mine's the train too, actually. I like the idea of the train being an easy setup for like a tournament organizer. Also, you just buy like maybe 4 or 5 of those, add some rocky outcrops and some trees, and then you have a Dol Guldur board. So I think it's really cool. I saw that Australian guy, I forget his name, Zorbazorp. I saw him do a huge build with it, and it just looks amazing, the terrain that he's using. But because Matt also said that, I guess I'll choose something else. The dice look amazing.
Yeah,
Like you rave about it, Tim. You always want the square dice with the sharp edges. You don't like
I just, you know what it is like, if anybody else has had that kind of, you know, the dice that they use at casinos, I think the feel of those dice are fantastic. And I like that it's kind of rounded edges as well on these ones, because like the ones at casinos are very sharp. And I think what's great about these dice is you get the benefit of kind of the more original smaller dice with the curved edges, but then you get the thickness of the actual new dice that are coming out, like the casinos. I think it's kind of the perfect compromise. So I'm always a big fan of the feel of the new dices that they're releases. So, and especially for me, my favorite army is Mordor. So to see Witch King and Sauron dice released, I'm a big fan of that personally. And as soon as the Sauron dice become available, I will absolutely be buying a set of those.
Yeah. I ordered a few of each for the same reason, because I'm painting up a Morannon Legion, and I was like, actually, both of these dice could work for them, because you could do a Minas Morgul with the Witch King one. You could do like a Morannon one with the Sauron one. So they are really cool. But we learned something. You like rolling dice, not just at tournaments, Tim.
So I managed to miss all of the dice options because I think when we signed on to do our pre-ordering, like there was something different about the way they came out in the US. There's only like one dice set that came out in the US. And then by the time we got told the other dice that was on there, we signed on, it was already sold out. So I think we missed out on all the dice options. But by the way, Rainier, raise your coffee cup, take another sip out of that. You have the spookiest blue halo around that coffee cup.
Yeah.
So for those who are listening and not watching, this is actually being recorded on Halloween night. So Rainier is, I guess, kind of buying into that theme. He has kind of the nice dark lighting going on. I think as far as I can tell, the only light there is the glow from his pumpkin. And he's also got this nice blue coffee mug that when he kind of waves it around, especially in front of the white part of the screen there, you get this kind of creepy blue halo that he's like drinking this magic potion out of. It's really, I got to give you props, Rainier, for
true.
doing a themed record here.
It's true.
You know, you really fully
5
commit,
a.m.
and
on
that's what we
purpose.
appreciate. You know,
Yep.
you
Thank
fully
you
commit
guys.
to these
Appreciate
things.
it. I'm realizing too, my face looks orange too. So is that the pumpkin you're seeing, Matt?
Well, you know, you do have kind of like glowing eyes from the reflection of something on your glasses. So it actually, you know, you are doing a pretty fair jack-o'-lantern imitation right now.
Well, I just did come back from a seance, so that's probably what it is.
Yeah, you're right. That'll do it.
All right, Evan, favorite thing?
So now that
Love that transaction too.
now that we're pretty much sure that a new Necromancer won't be coming out, I guess the thing I'm most maybe not excited for but interested in is the new Witch King model. I don't know necessarily if I'm going to use it because we already have 2 models that work perfectly fine as Witch Kings, but I think it's just cool that it's so customizable with what you want to run on the Witch King. You can put on the crown, you can take off the crown, you can put on the flail that no one's going to use, you can put on the Morgul blade, that sort of thing. And I think it's a good idea, and they should probably continue, at least with single heroes, making stuff like this.
So I think this is, so let's see, number of Witch Kings we've got. We've got the Witch King.
We've got the Dol Guldur one as well. So
yeah, all right. So we've got that. Well, I'm just talking about the regular Witch Kings because I'm checking in on model repetition here. So we have the Witch King, the original Witch King with no Morgul crown. We've got the Witch King with the Morgul crown that was mounted and on foot. We have, I guess there's the Weathertop Witch King that's floating around out there. We have the Witch King on Fell Beast that you can do. So I guess that's 4 of them.
A diorama Witch King with
oh yeah, we got the diorama Witch King, and yet we still have 0 forlongs on a horse.
I knew that was gonna come.
Yeah.
How about all the multiple copies of the Fellowship members, right?
Yeah, that's right.
How many
Yeah,
Gandalfs do we have? More than we'd ever need, I can say.
yeah, that's right. We have a Gandalf for every season.
I feel
Yeah.
like that's everybody, though.
Oh, you're
Right,
muted.
sorry.
You're
Yep,
muted,
yep,
Tim.
absolutely. I mean, come on, guys. You're telling me you didn't want another Gandalf the White? I mean, he's used so much. I mean, you telling me you didn't want that?
Yep.
All right, so we'll go over to the
Oh,
first.
what about you, Tim? What are you excited about?
Oh, I said the dice. The dice are what.
Tim is
I
I
always
got that
excited
because
by
you're
this.
just talking about casinos. So I time tuned in.
You know what else? I saw in the back of the book, they showed how to paint certain models a certain way. So like they showed like how to paint the Necromancer to have that fiery effect. I thought that was a really cool little thing that they added, where they have like step-by-step instructions on how to paint certain models. So
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to
Yeah.
spend most of our time talking about the legendary legions because that's what everybody wants to hear dissected. But there are other fun things in this book, including many scenarios that look pretty fun. And I agree with you that the little master class that they have on painting the Necromancer to be a fiery Necromancer looks really cool. And I think I'm going to try that at some point. I'll see if I can acquire a new Necromancer and create one of those. But they also have a little class on how to paint the new terrain.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, definitely.
That's good. I'm also curious what other people think their favorite parts are because I don't know. It just seems like a kind of a random supplement. So
Yeah, so definitely put that in the
comment,
comments,
guys.
everyone. Yeah. We'll move on to the first legendary legion, which is the Rangers of Mirkwood. So in this legendary legion, you can have Legolas, and Legolas can have an elven cloak. You can have Tauriel with elf bow, so it's included automatically. Mirkwood Ranger Captain. We all love those so much. Mirkwood Rangers and a Warhorn as an option for 30 points, and a Wood Elf Sentinel. The additional rules are Rangers Legion must be led by either Legolas or Tauriel, and a Rangers force may have 100% of its models armed with bows. So what the first special
Glad they
rule?
specified that since every model that you buy has a bow. I'd love it if they left that out, by the way. and you were stuck.
Yeah, you would take Legolas, Tauriel, and then one bowman because otherwise you'd be above your bow limit, and then you just take Mirkwood Ranger captains, and that would be your list.
The first special rule is knife mastery. Friendly models may reroll ones to wound when making strikes, and additionally, friendly models may use their shielding special rule even though they're not armed with a shield. However, if they elect to shield, they may not use their knife fighters or blade master special rules.
All right. So this gives them. Let me talk through this and make sure that I understand the purpose of this.
Mm-hmm.
So they reroll ones. I get that. That's just a way to make them kill more. The ability to shield. I assume this is what they do when they've been charged by like one orc with a spearman behind him.
Yes.
Am I right about that? That's the purpose of this rule, because otherwise you're better off just using your.
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah.
I think that's fair enough. Yeah, because I mean it's a good point. Why would you choose to be defensive when you could choose to have the same amount of attack?
I'm rolling 2 dice anyway. I may as well have a chance to kill something with them.
Yeah, this does have slightly more application with Legolas. Well, actually, we're going to talk about that later. But with Legolas, Tauriel, and the Mirkwood Ranger Captain, because they have more attacks. Though generally, if you're at a point where you have to shield with heroes, usually something has gone wrong.
It's gone horribly wrong. Right.
Especially seeing as the heroes in this army list, while Tauriel is okay, generally don't want to be fighting against enemy big heroes in a fair fight. They usually want to be surrounding them. So if you ever have to use that shielding rule on the heroes, things probably aren't going well.
But you're playing a Mirkwood Ranger list, so
I
the odds
like
of things not going well are probably high.
That's most of the time.
I like the addition though to the rule where they basically made it so that if you shield, you don't get the benefit to extra dice. I think that's a really great little thing so that you can't abuse that and just shield, let Tariel and Legolas kill stuff and just hold the line basically. So I'm really glad they added that little bit to it. You guys like the re-rolling ones, or is that just kind of like a little gimmick to you?
It can't hurt. I mean,
Yeah.
this is going to be a list that needs every bonus it can get, and that's a bonus. So
Yeah.
Is
All
it
takes
gonna make them more than remotely more competitive? No, not really. But it's there, and it's not bad. So, yay, I guess.
You can tell as we go through the theme, the writers were like, let's not do Athelian Rangers again.
yeah.
They
Well, I mean,
tread
it's hard-
lightly.
You're not going to create an Athelian Ranger list out of models that cost 14 points apiece. But so I don't think that was a real fear. But I mean, I haven't done the math on this. I mean, how many? So it's say like 600 points. How many of these guys could you get? So 190 points, or Legolas and Tariel give you 190.
So
points.
21 of these guys are around 300 points.
So you can take what? Tariel's Valor, right? So you can take 30 of them with the two of them?
Yeah. So 30 is
420? No.
Yeah.
420.
420. And then 110 is 530. So it's 530, and then
Well, you are going to want to take at least 1 or 2 Wood Elf Sentinels.
what I'm trying to figure out is how many Wood Elf Sentinels can you jam in here, and I think you can, if you just take Legolas and Tariel, I think you can jam in like 4 Sentinels, which is that's actually a little frightening now that I think about it.
Yeah, it was like 30 something at 650.
Yeah, and aren't they no, okay, so they're not knife fighter sentinels. They're 2 attack sentinels, but they're not knife fighting sentinels, which would be really scary.
Yes.
So yeah, it's 600 points. Geez, could you get like, hang on a second. I gotta do some math here. All right, so let's see, we got 110 are Legolas and Tariel.
At 600 points, you're going to have about 32-ish models.
No, I'm sorry, 190 are Legolas.
Yeah, 190.
100 are going to be Sentinels, so that's 290. And then, so you get 310 left over, which, I don't know, somebody's better at
that.
Math.
Is 22
divided by 14.
I think it's about 22.
22. All right, so it's 26. That's 28 models at, that's actually 28 models at 600 points.
That's like the same amount of models as the list we reviewed, but
yeah, it is
50 points less. Like, oh.
And that was a 650 point list, not a 600 point list. So that's almost right on the money of number of models that you'd want for a 600 point list. And they're all fight 5, and they all have bows, and they all have elven cloaks, and most of them have knife fighting.
Heroic accuracy with Legolas. Ooh.
Well, I mean, I think you've only got 6 might in the list, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So, but you do have 4 sentinels that can do funky stuff.
We haven't even gone over all the other rules too.
All right. So I mean, we've been kind of poo-pooing this list.
Realize,
now that
gosh,
I've kind of like run the numbers on it, I'm like, maybe. I don't know. Evan, are you convinced that there might be something here?
No.
No, okay.
But anyway. Tim, you can keep going.
Okay.
And maybe at the end I can talk about why I think this list sucks.
All right.
Okay. So if you have a point, we'll just stop. But if not, I'll just keep going through the rules until we get to the end. The next one is the Prince of Mirkwood. Legolas gains the Knife Fighter special rule when he is part of the Legendary Legion. So I mean, that's great. I mean, Legolas goes into 2 guys. He goes up to 3 attacks. It's awesome. Can't take a horse though, so that's a little bit of a downside. Obviously, it wouldn't make sense for him to do so, but you take what the Legendary Legion gives you. Clear the nests. Friendly models gain the hatred of spider special rule.
Yay!
Spider Queen does not like this.
Yeah, actually, I missed this rule the first time I read it, and now that I see it, I actually think this list is overpowered. It should honestly be banned, just how broken it is.
Yeah, well, you're just in the pocket of the Spider Queen lobby.
Mhm.
I'm going to talk about this after I read out the rule. The next one, Masters of the Forest. Whenever friendly models that is within 1 inch of a tree or within a piece of woodland terrain suffers a wound, roll a 6. On the roll of a natural 6, that wound is ignored exactly as if his point of fate has been spent. I honestly, and I mean this genuinely, I really think they should have made this more of like a blinding light kind of effect, to be honest with you. I know they have the elven cloak so they could hide behind stuff, but I think what they should have done is just if you're within like a certain distance, you can't, because like that's their whole thing, right? Like I just wish they made them more ability to defend against shooting. I just think that they should have made it because they're defense 3, and even though you have a bunch of bows, if someone else has, let's say, Lake Town, and they have 20 bows in blinding light, they're probably going to win that war because they're defense 3. And so I think that kind of ruins their whole. I wish they had made this more about protecting them for shooting. But if anybody else has anything that they can add that, if not, I'll move on to the next
I
one.
think they've tried to in a way because they are ambushers and they have to be within terrain and like woods and stuff with the Legendary Legion.
I like the Fury save aspect of it. I think that's cool, but I think there should have been one maybe on a 4+, the arrow, some kind of weird thing to protect them from shooting. I just think they should have added something like that, but that's just my opinion.
So I guess my thought on this rule was because I mean it's a 6, and it's a 6 when you're near a specific terrain type that doesn't exist on many boards and will rarely exist on many other ones.
And it's an inch, not even like a 6
yeah,
inch.
So it's like it's a who cares rule. I mean, the way to actually make this rule matter would have been you get a save on a 6 when you're near any type of terrain, within 1 inch of any type of terrain, and you save on like maybe a 5 or a 6 if you're near a tree or in woodland terrain. Because I don't think that would have been overpowered. I think that gives them something where they get some sort of advantage on every board that they play on, as long as they're not playing on a billiard table. And it's going to be really hard to overpower this list, or create a list that's overpowered in this Legendary Legion. I don't think that would have been over the top. I mean, so I guess part of the issue with the shooting, Tim, is if you're within an inch of any type of terrain, because these guys have elven cloaks, you're probably not being shot at anyway because nobody can see you further than 6 inches away, even if like the tip of your toe is behind a little fluff of lichen.
I just think of it like this, right? So most of the time when you shoot at someone, you're trying to kind of focus fire an area, right? And more than likely, this is going to force your army to split up if you want to get that goal of getting the elven cloak. So you're going to have people out in the open that can still get shot at. And I wish that they would have figured out some way to kind of make, like, if you're within 6 inches of a woodland terrain piece on a 4+, the shot is ignored or something like that. Like something, or like on a 6, the shot is completely ignored. You know what I mean? Something like that, like a larger range of something where they just don't get hurt as much.
Yeah. So the real problem with this list is the fact that these very expensive models are defense 3. And because of the elven cloak, I mean, this is an army that never should be more than an inch from some sort of terrain, right? At least not in the approach march period of the game where you're going to get shot, because you don't want a defense 3 14-point guy going down to an orc bow on the way in. But I think the useful part of this rule is actually when you're fighting, because it basically gives you a chance to kind of slough off some of those hits from close combat. But a 6 just isn't enough to do it. It would be I'd much rather see him sloughing off like 1/3 of the hits.
Even if they brought back the rule for Elven Cloaks, where they gave them the old edition rules, where if you're hidden at all, you don't get the you can't shoot, you can't target them. I think I would have liked that. Something as simple as that. Like if they're hidden, you can't shoot them.
Well, so the problem with that is in this list, everybody that's in this list is a ranger, right? The advantage to the old rules of Elven Cloaks were you could have like your front line of defense 6 elves with shields.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of defense 3 elves with bows standing behind them that nobody could see. There are no defense 6 elves in this list, so the only thing you're going to hide behind is another defense 3 elf.
No, and I get that. I guess I was making more of a point of, let's say one model's hiding behind a terrain piece where they can peek, and then you put the other one behind them, so then you can't see either of them no matter what. If that kind of makes sense to that regard.
Yeah. So okay.
So
like
then you end
up with the endless string of guys.
Yes.
Out like 6 or 7 and can't see any of them behind the one tree.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would be one of those things, though, right? Where it kind of like, even though it's so situational, or it would require, it gives them a chance to never be shot at, and then it forces you to go to them. But anyway, I think
it does. I mean, I think at the end of the day, that would probably be a little silly looking. Although I will say this, there is a historical precedent for this. And this showed up in the American Civil War. It was in one of the big battles. I can't remember if it was the Wilderness or Antietam, but there was example of I think it was a Confederate soldier in one of his memoirs was talking about how they're in the midst of this big firefight going back and forth, and there was like this one tree, and there was this kind of line of soldiers behind the one tree that were going back because it was the only cover around. And you could see as the firelight came in from the right, the line of soldiers would shift to the left of the tree and create that line, just like you would see with the Mirkwood Rangers there. And then if fire came in from the left, the line would then shift to the other side of the tree. So yeah, I guess that's the historical precedent for the Elven Cloak, where like one guy hides behind a tree and another guy hides behind him, another guy hides behind him, and then you've got 12 inches of Mirkwood Rangers hiding behind this one tree. But
okay, the last special rule is Silent Ambush, which is basically Master of Battle. So they get to deploy with each other on a +1/-1 situation. Evan, I know you said you had some things to talk about. If you want to go over those.
Yeah, so I'd like to first just go over probably part of the reason why this list got a Legendary Legion, and that's because it's garbage. Well, at least taking it in Halls of Thranduil is complete and utter trash. There's a couple of reasons why that's the case. One of them is the Mirkwood Rangers just die in combat. Putting one guy into combat with them and putting a spear behind them basically means that if they win the fight, they're not going to kill you because they've just got one attack and you've probably got defense 6. And if you win the fight, you kill them because their defense is absolute garbage. And other things that make the list bad is that Mirkwood Rangers are overcosted. 14 points. I don't care if you've got a 200% bow limit. It's still not going to work.
One bow in each hand.
Now, luckily, Mirkwood Rangers do compensate for this by having the option for a Warhorn for 30 points, which is a must include in every single Mirkwood Ranger army list. Because obviously going from Courage 5 to Courage 6 gets you absolutely nothing, and there's no reason to ever take this. I don't know why they included it. So in general, the Mirkwood Rangers just are absolute garbage. Luckily, in this Legendary Legion, they compensate for this by giving them a whole bunch of special rules that do absolutely nothing. Silent Ambush accomplishes basically nothing. It's Madrigal's special rule, and he basically gets it for free in the Gondor list. And the reason he gets it for free is because in many scenarios, it's not going to do much. And for some scenarios, it's going to help you a little bit. So that's not going to help you. Masters of the Forest, as we talked about before, has so many different caveats and just exceptions and all that stuff. The fact that you need to have your warriors within 1 inches of a tree, and they need to roll a 6 to avoid the wounds just does absolutely nothing. I'm not going to even discuss why Hatred Spider is not a remotely useful thing for these guys to have. The Knife Fighter special rule on Legolas is okay, but if you were taking a Thranduil's Hall's army, then you could just take Legolas on horse and be much, much happier.
You'd have to spend 10 points for it.
Oh no, 10 points for a horse. Whatever will you do? And then Knife Mastery, re-rolling ones to wound is fine. It's not hugely instrumental. And so basically the only rule that's like gonna help you even a little bit is the ability to shield. And even then, shielding by definition won't improve your situation because you cannot do damage.
You can die slower.
That's true. Your defense 3 guys can die ever so slightly slower, though if you lose the combat, you're still going to die. And I would like to point out that there is no way to get a banner in this list. So you're not going to be able to get those crucial rerolls on your elves, which are very important for high fight models.
Or the scenario points too. Like,
that is also true.
Yeah,
Another point to make.
That is a big problem with the list. Is the no banner.
Yeah, remember the Mirkwood Ranger captains also do not have march. So you are moving 6 inches and you are only moving 6 inches. There's no way around that.
Forgot about that. Yeah.
So you're going to get run over and reconnoiter. You're going to get run over and seize the prize. You're not getting to the middle first and hold ground. All sorts of stuff that being locked into a movement 6 army is not good for. So overall, this army just taken from Thranduil's Halls, I might actually argue is better, especially at higher points, because you can take Thranduil, who's very good. You can also take a random Mirkwood guy with a banner who can help out a little bit. And this Legendary Legion is not good.
All right, you've
yeah.
I'm gonna say, like, there's no like, how do you follow up from that? Like, that was just perfect.
Yeah, but it misses out on some opportunities. They could have given them like 2 extra, what is it, like 2 or 3 extra inches movement through forest or something like they did in the movies to make them a little more competitive.
Actually, that would be interesting. Is if everybody in this list moved 8.
Yeah, because it makes them more competitive because all the scenarios are like have moved towards.
I actually wouldn't mind if they did like a thing where, and it might be too much, but again, it's based on terrain. If they did like, if they're moving through forests, they can move twice as fast. Like you could move 12 inches in a turn for if they're running through the forest directly.
That might be a little much if they're like if they
you
fly.
So for example,
like, calm
so
down,
if you have let's say you have 6 inches right of a forest. That counts as 3 inches, and then you have 3 inches outside of the forest.
You could do it to where it's as if they called the heroic march, so they cannot attack in that move. Because I think 12 inches of like you just surround whoever you want and stuff.
Well, no, I'm just saying like if you're in the forest, your movement like doubles, but then if you leave it, it goes back. So if you use 3 inches of movement to go to 6, and you have 3 inches left outside of it,
Interesting.
I mean, if Lursa Scouts can go 8 inches and Noldorian Exiles or whatever can go 8 inches, I don't know why these guys can't go 8 inches.
All right, and now we're going to move into the next Legendary Legion, which is the Vanquishers of the Necromancer. So the army consists of Saruman the White, Galadriel, Lady of Light, Gandalf the Grey, Elrond, Master of Rivendell, and he has an option to take, or with heavy armor.
Comes with his heavy armor.
Yeah, it comes with his heavy armor. And Radagast the Brown, and he does have the option to take his sleigh. The additional rules are the Vanquishers of Necromancer always include Galadriel, Lady of Light, Saruman the White, and Saruman the White is always the army's leader. A Vanquisher of Necromancer's force is always deployed as a single warband, with Saruman as the warband's captain. The first special rule, are you in need of assistance? Friendly models gain a bonus of +1 to resist pests if they're within 6 inches of another friendly model. We already know that one. Unless anybody has something to say about it, we can just move on to the next one.
Yeah, that's just a repeat of the army list special rule.
This is a big one. Masters of Magic, friendly models may still attempt to cast magical powers even if they are already engaged in combat. That is enormous.
This
Here
is
come
a
the sorcerer's
game changer.
blast.
Yeah. So I had a chance to play. We one of the local players was good enough to come over on Saturday, and Evan and I each got to take one of these legendary legions against him as the foil, and I took this legendary legion, and boy, that Masters of Magic rule just changes the way these things work, because to a certain extent, you no longer care about losing.
Priority.
You no longer care about losing priority because you still can do all sorts of stuff to your opponent, even if you lose priority. I mean, he could go in, he could charge in all of your figures, and he could get his big heavy hitter guy in there, and that big heavy hitter is still going to get hit with a panic steed, 2 transfixes, and a banish from this crowd. And oh, by the way, they may also get a nature's or a Wrath of Bruinen from Elrond. So this, it's impossible to say how big an effect this rule has in the game, because there's basically no way to stop this avalanche of magic that these 5 guys can put out.
Okay.
Yeah, so I simultaneously like this rule and absolutely despise it for various reasons. The reason I like it, obviously, is because it's kind of what makes this list function. It allows the White Council to do what they want to do, no matter what the opponent does to you. And in the same vein, I absolutely despise this special rule because that's exactly what happens. There's no counterplay to this whatsoever. There's no way to get around it. You can't stop their spells from going off. If you're focusing on big heroes, you're basically screwed because they're going to get shut down every single turn, no matter what you do. I think of all of the special rules in this Legendary Legion, of which there are many, this is probably the most potentially problematic and suffocating of the special rules. And I think for especially less experienced players and even more experienced players can make playing against this Legendary Legion quite unfun.
Yeah, so we can discuss this a bit in tactics at the end, but I think a lot of what Evan just said is true.
Okay. We'll go on to the next special rule, which I think is probably my favorite out of all of them, which is meddle not in the affairs of the wizards. The attacks characteristic of wizard models in the Legendary Legion is always equal to the remaining wounds. So I'll just give my quick take on this. Obviously, that means the 3 wizards go to 3 attacks if they're healthy. I think the most underrated thing about this build is the ability for Radagast to renew wounds, so he can always bring up your attacks. So I think that if you're, and to be honest with you, I would almost, if someone was in a dire spot where they had 1 wound left, I would almost consider casting a fortified version to bring them up to 3 if they were in real trouble. Because the ability for you to bring someone up to 3 attacks compared to 1 is so underrated. Even 2 to 3 is just huge. And for him, like, the craziest thing about it is, even if they get charged with the new rule, he can always renew someone's wound. So unless you're doing multiple wounds to someone, and this is an interesting thing as well, it almost makes it so that the wizards want to take wounds instead of using their fate. So it's almost like you now want to take 2 wounds before you start rolling fate. So it's a really interesting little dynamic there with the new rule. But what is everyone else's thoughts on it?
It's crazy powerful. Like you said, too, like, how do you even kill anybody? Like,
well,
Radagast is just going to be like healing.
I mean, to give you a sense, I mean, we played the 850 point version of this. So I had, the 5 guys with Radagast on the sleigh. I played against a 46 figure fiefdoms army, and I quartered him. And at the end of the game, all of my figures had full wounds left. I mean, I took some wounds, but then they came right back because, not only Radagast renew, but Radagast has an additional ability that's also in here where he gives even more wounds back.
That's insane. Like, I don't like kind of what you said, like, a good player with this against like a not good player, like they're gonna destroy
Yeah.
them.
So we'll talk again. We'll talk tactics with this list
Yeah.
at the end. But another good point that's being made about this list is I think you're right, Tim. There are times when you just, if you're the wizard, maybe throw a fate at it. If that doesn't work, just take the wound because you'll know Radagast will give it back to you next turn, one way or the other.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, and that's the other thing to
You
consider
can't
as well.
you can't get too carried away with it because if you end up getting caught with one wound, you're down to one attack.
Well, that's a good point of maybe, that's a good point I didn't think about, which is obviously if you take the wound, you lose the attack. But my thought was if you just take if you take 2 wounds, if you take 2 wounds, I definitely think you fate that. If you take 1, I think you just take the wound, let Radagast renew you for that turn. And then that way you're not, if you take 2, I think you use the fate.
So somebody, I don't have the rule book in front of me, but does Elrond also have renew?
Yes, he does.
Yeah. Okay.
He does.
So that I never had to use this, but I mean, so you have 2 renew spells that are that can go off regardless of whether you're charged. And as long as you keep those guys, well, we'll get to another special rule, but as long as those guys are near Saruman, they're going to be re-rolling the cast numbers on it. So you can be pretty sure that you're going to get at least 1 wound back and potentially 2 at the cost of losing some of your offensive magic. But I mean, there were a couple times in that game when I had Gandalf and I was like, well, I could spend this rerollable fate, or I could just take the wound, and somebody's bound to give him the wound back. And sure enough, they did. So.
Yeah. So I'm going to go off a little bit on a tangent here and say I think all of the wizards should have this special rule in their base profile. Because what do we see the wizards doing in all of the movies? We see them whacking people with their sticks and their swords and spinning around and killing a whole bunch of guys. And seeing as the wizards aren't exactly that powerful in this edition now that Radagast Nature's Wrath has been nerfed, I think this is sort of the buff that wizards need to not necessarily be like overly powerful, but to actually be something you'd want to consider taking in a list, because it sort of takes away their huge vulnerabilities of not being able to do anything offensively whatsoever and being very weak to just getting charged and killed. And I think it would add a sort of nice competitive and themey dynamic to the wizards that would sort of flesh them out a bit more.
I only worry about if you did that because I definitely think they need at least 2 attacks. But I think what would make it cool is if you made it specific to this Legendary Legion and then they just had 2 attacks. Because if they have 3 attacks based on their wounds, obviously, at that point, why would anybody not take a wizard like Radagast for 150 points? Because he still gets the ability to renew. He can do a little bit of Nature's Wrath. He can exceed.
I think you may have to adjust their points if you were going to.
Yes, because at that point, I would worry that I would almost never not take a wizard if they have 3 attacks. Because it's like I can throw them into combat. I can cast spells, like cast a spell, put them into combat.
I think Gandalf might need a reworking because he has Heroic Strike. I'm not sure about the other 2 wizards.
Okay, so you take away the strike.
They're stuck. They're stuck with Fight 5, which with no strike means that the 3 attacks are very unreliable. And also,
would you give them a defense though? Because they are kind of defensive in that regard.
Well, they have defense.
Do all of them
already,
have defense?
Except for Gandalf.
Gandalf
So maybe
Gandalf
swap out
has
strike
strike
for defense on
Okay.
Gandalf to make him more like similar with the other wizards.
I don't know. I think so. I guess I'm in your camp, Tim. I think outside of this Legendary Legion, I understand why there are 3 within this Legendary Legion. I think outside this Legendary Legion, I'd be happy with 2 attacks on the wizards, and maybe 3 for Gandalf the White. And I think that probably does that. If you're going to keep him at the current point level, I think that probably does the trick for the wizards kind of outside of this, because then they're still scary. I mean, they're still somebody who can run down your average troop type, and you're somebody who you can imagine is
you can take them all on horses
stuff. You take them on horses, they get their extra. They get their extra thing. I mean, Radagast has ways to get other attacks, so it's kind of less of an issue for him. But if I had to go for wizard attacks outside of this particular list, I think I'd go for 2 rather than 3. But
I'm gonna be controversial. I don't think I'd only change Gandalf the White's attacks to maybe 3. I don't think because
or
Gandalf
6.
wasn't 7 with Shadowfast. No, because I don't see Gandalf the Grey mowing down that many Moria goblins or anything. You see him go up against the Belrog and he's taking it out. And outside of the White Council, I don't know. I don't even see
the
that
Goblin
Radagast
King.
does.
Did you see him in
Goblin
Lake
King.
Town as well? Like he was murdering Gundabad orcs. Like
That's
I mean,
true.
he's got 2 weapons that must give him 2 attacks, right?
Fair
He's
point.
got his sword and his staff, and you see
Plus,
him
if
using
you-
both of them at the same time.
If you compare it to other profiles as well, right? Like a captain gets 2 attacks. I'm pretty sure Gandalf's a better fighter than a captain, I would imagine. Like if you were to put the 2 against each other, I'm pretty sure Gandalf wins that battle.
But you would have to like revamp the points of like all the wizards and stuff and like kind of like restructure it. I don't know how they would do it too. Just the new supplement just has all the wizards have 2 attacks. That would be interesting. It caused quite a stir, I think.
All right. So
Moving on.
Yeah. Again, another very powerful special rule here. Lady of the Golden Wood. Galadriel may target any model with the banishment magical power as if it were a spirit model. Non-spirit models targeted by Galadriel's banishment gain a single free point of will immediately resist this magical power. Additionally, friendly models within 3 inches of Galadriel gain resistance to magic. I think it is brilliant the way that they did this because they give you an ability to resist the banishment even if you couldn't normally do so, but it still allows her to do damage as if she wants whoever she wants to. I think this is my favorite rule by far.
Damage, by the way, is not the issue here. So let me talk about 2 tactical applications of this aside from just plinking off 1 figure a turn. Tactical application number 1. You've got a whole bunch of wizards who are the first thing they're going to do is cast Channel Terrifying Aura. So you need to roll 3 dice to charge them. In most situations, you're probably going to get at most like 1 guy to get in and stop them if you have priority. So you get 1 guy to like go in and charge Radagast and a slave, for example. Galadriel, who probably also got charged, can just turn around and banish that guy. And Radagast is like, "Ooh, I'm off to the races again," and goes off and gets his charge in. And she can do that against if 1 person charges Elrond or whatever, banish him, and Elrond goes where you need. So that's tactic number 1. Tactic number 2, banish is a spell just like Black Dart, where you get to choose either the rider or the mount. So big mounted hero, Aragorn on a horse comes charging in and charges Galadriel, and Galadriel's like, I think I'll make your horse disappear. Poof, and Aragorn goes clomping right onto the ground, and is stuck. So Galadriel has now become a very effective ring wraith as far as dismounting enemy heroes.
Well, I mean, the horse still gets a die to resist. So
the horse gets a die to resist, but remember, she, because of a special rule we're going to talk about later, she gets to reroll a die on the attack. So what you can do is spend her free one, spend 1 additional one, and then take the reroll if you don't get high enough. So the odds are she's going to be rolling like a 5 or a 6 to get this spell off. And, although the horse will get a die to resist, no might can affect that.
Yeah.
So if he doesn't roll the 5 or 6, he's stuck.
That's true.
And I got to say, when I played this game, I got a lot of these banishes off against, just random guys. I think there were maybe like 1 or perhaps 2 that the random die was able to resist.
We'll move on to the next one. I think that one's my favorite though. But
yeah, and quickly on the resistant to magic, which is the other thing here, which is the 3-inch one. My first question is why, and my second question is just like, couldn't this have been at least a little bit more creative? Like I sort of understand what they were going for with this, which is the whole, we want these guys to be completely invincible, but they've already got the +1 to resist tests. They've got the Fortify Spirit. They've got other special rules that we'll sort of talk about later. I don't necessarily know why this was here, except that they just wanted to give every single model a 3-inch buffing special rule.
Yeah, and for those keeping track at home, you should keep in mind that this special rule gives the die of resistant to magic. The first special rule that we talked about gives it a +1. So this is not just a resistant to magic that you're getting. This is a +1 resistant to magic that you're getting. Because by definition, if you're within 3 inches of Galadriel, you're within 6 inches of another model from this list.
Okay. The next one, the Grey Wanderer. Gandalf gains the Fearless special rule. Furthermore, friendly models within 3 inches of Gandalf cannot have their courage value reduced by enemy magical powers or special rules. It's
Next.
good. Yeah.
Like, why?
Like I can't imagine people are casting like Drain Courage or the Ring.
Yeah,
Race
you
thing
can
is gonna
you have
affect-
like the ring race, and they're just like, I'm gonna drain courage. Like, watch
This-
me, I'm gonna slowly middle you away.
This
Yeah.
does absolutely nothing.
Well,
does
it takes away
nothing.
that one pesky -1 that every once in a while one of these wizards will fail, and it takes them from next to impossible to fail courage to impossible to fail courage. But
Okay. Next one, Lord of Imladris. Elrond may declare a heroic strike every fight phase without expending might. Additionally, other friendly models within 3 inches of Elrond count as being in range of a banner. Huge, huge, huge. 3-inch banner and a free heroic strike every turn. I mean, he can basically go toe to toe with anyone. I love this one.
just for clarification, and somebody tell me if I'm reading this wrong, I think because it says additionally other friendly models within 3 inches of Elrond, Elrond does not banner himself.
Correct.
Okay. He gets Lord of the West, so he gets to
Yeah.
roll 1 anyway, but
Yeah.
he does not banner himself. Everybody else banners.
I mean, it's like you said, the Lord of the West. He gets the reroll anyway, so it kind of
Yeah,
makes.
but he doesn't get 2 rerolls.
He doesn't get the infamous dwarf Durin double reroll, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Right. Wisest of the Astari. Saruman can attempt to cast 2 magical powers each turn rather than 1, but may not attempt to cast the same magical power twice or target the same model twice. Additionally, when other friendly models are within 3 inches of Saruman attempt to cast a magical power, they may re-roll a single d6 as part of the casting attempt. Wow.
That's nasty.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is the third of the 3 Uber rules that's in here. So, and this is interesting on 2 levels. The first is I can cast 2 spells, and there's a bunch of things you can do. I mean, he can cast like the 1 protect himself spell and then do an offensive spell in the same turn. He's got to burn up some will do it. Some other neat tricks. I will cast a compel on this random guy on a horse, move him right in front of your hero, and then I will. Oh, actually, no, that doesn't work.
You can't target the same.
Can't target
twice.
the same model. But what I can do maybe is I can either I can. How would you have to do this? Well, I don't know. You're right, because you can't do the same thing. But I was trying to think of an interesting trick where you could do. I mean, one thing you could do is you could cast a compel on random guy. Cast a compel on here on horse. He says, well, that's just a compel. I know there's going to be other spells coming in, so maybe I won't resist this because I'm far away. Move him behind somebody, and then Sorcerer's Blast the other guy.
Yeah.
You could do that. But the real kind of humdinger is this: everybody within 3 inches of Saruman now wears a Morgul crown. And this is something I found out when I was playing the list, is that the increase in offensive spell power that this rule creates is incredible. You are now, not only is Saruman re-rolling, but everybody else is. So everybody else is pretty much guaranteed to get a spell off. And even, even if it's just Elrond, like firing off his Nature's Wrath, you're pretty sure it's going to go off. Even if you're just going to send Gandalf and have him like restore Elrond's will so he can keep firing off that Nature's Wrath, you're pretty sure you're going to get that one off. The one thing Evan and I were talking about is, oh, well, now you don't need to spend an extra will on channeling because you can always re-roll that, that one when you roll it. And of course, the first time I did this with Saruman, he cast Channel Terrifying Aura, rolls as one. It's like, haha, I can re-roll this, rolls a one again. So that's not foolproof. But even somebody with me who rolls as badly as I do when I play with Magic can actually make Magic work with this list. All right, I'll shut up now about this rule.
So
It's pretty dangerous.
Yeah. I echo what Dad says about the whole. So reliability with wizards is sort of a fine line, because if you want to get your spells off, you need to spend extra will points in order to do it. And if you spend extra will points, you tend to run out of them. And when you run out of them, all of your exhaustion spells go away. And then you're stuck just throwing one dice a turn. And that's about as unreliable as it gets. This special rule, we already knew was extremely strong on Saruman, and it's why it makes him so good. Now all of your other casters get it, and it just increases their longevity so much. It increases Elrond's chances of casting Wrath of Bruin in every turn on one die from 50% to 75%. It increases Gandalf's strength and will on Elrond every turn from 50% to 75%. It increases Galadriel's Fortify Spirits by so much. It means that she's more likely to banish models very easily. It's just so strong that these wizards who used to have to rather spend multiple will points in order to guarantee that these spells go off. Now they can very comfortably say, I'm going to throw one will at this, and I am almost definitely going to get it off. And it increases their longevity and reliability so much.
Yeah, I guess the one other thing I'd have to say about this is this rule makes order of operations with this list very important if you are like moving forward, because you only get this within 3 inches of Saruman. That's not a big distance, so you have to make sure that you're moving Saruman somewhere in that sequence so that he is within 3 inches of everybody else when you need them to cast the spell. And there are a couple times where I screwed this up and like moved things in the wrong order. And ended up having to cast a spell outside of 3 inches of Saruman. But even then, after quartering this 46-figure army, I don't think I had anybody who had less than 2 will in this list. I'm not sure Gandalf spent any of his 6 by the time we were done.
It definitely sounds very, very good. I mean, the thing that you look at all these as individuals, but together it literally does create that atmosphere of how do you stop this really in terms of like, maybe not in terms of scenario, but in terms of trying to kill these guys. How do you stop these guys? The next rule is Protector of the Greenwood. Once each turn at any point in the move phase, Radagast may choose a single model in base contact with him and roll a d6. On a 4 or 5, the chosen model regains a wound lost earlier in the battle. On a 6, the model regains all of its lost wounds. Additionally, friendly models within 3 inches of Radagast may move through difficult terrain without penalty. I don't know how often this will pop up. It could pop up a lot, but I think the fact that you have to be in base contact with them makes it a limiting situation. But for the ability
Not necessarily, because remember, it's at any point during the move phase, so he can just do like a drive-by and run past a guy and then go and do what he wants.
You can go tag somebody, move 2 inches, tag somebody with a sleigh, heal them up, and then go 8 inches off and then charge somebody else.
Interesting. Okay, fair enough. So, I mean, a 4+ free wound means he can use his spell on himself because it's not a spell, so you don't have to. You can use your spells towards something else, like maybe you wanted to knock everyone to the ground. But I think it's a pretty good rule. I think it's probably the weakest out of the amount of them, but it's still a very good rule because you don't have to spend anything to get it. It's just go in base contact and you get it.
Yeah,
So
you
Uh,
can this list can regenerate 3 wounds a turn,
Yes.
which when you consider it's got 15 wounds in it, is quite a big deal.
And
So, well, one little thing about this difficult terrain rule, because it just confuses me greatly. I think the way you actually need to use this is you need to park Radagast in a space like in difficult terrain. So when models move through the difficult terrain, they get the bonus, because I think once they leave 3 inches, they no longer move through difficult terrain without penalty. And they can't just like end within 3 inches of him and expect to not get the penalties. So basically, if you're trying to get through difficult terrain, what you're going to want to do is move Radagast first, park him in a piece of difficult terrain, and then just have all of your other guys run through and get this bonus once they get within range of him, and then get it that way. I think it's sort of
they run past him.
yeah, it's a very wonky rule to set up and sort of
probably should have been 6
confusing at
inches.
first glance.
Yeah,
Probably should have been 6.
there's also some odd stuff. Like if Radagast is on a sleigh, I think the only rough terrain he can move through is woods.
Correct.
So if he's on the sleigh, some weird things happen where he's going to have to like drive next to the rough terrain if it's like rocks or something, and then the rest of the team like runs along next to him. But yeah, it's interesting.
So the last rule here is an interesting one. I have my own theory on how you use this, but it'll be interesting to hear everyone else's. Go back to the void from whence you came. Once per game, if Galadriel has at least 1 will point remaining, Galadriel may choose to exert her full power instead of causing a magical power. If she does so, then she immediately casts the channeled version of the banishment magical power, which cannot be resisted. Models may use fate points to prevent the wounds individually as normal. However, immediately after casting the banishment magical power in this way, place Galadriel prone and reduce her will to 0. Additionally, for the rest of the battle, she does not benefit from her Lady of Lothlorien and War Aspect special rules. I mean, I'm going to imagine this is a final last-ditch effort to kill the general, would be my guess. But what do you guys think the purpose of this rule is?
Yeah, I mean, she becomes completely useless after you use the special rule. I'm fairly sure the war aspect, is that the -1 one? Or is it the punch people one?
It's the -1. It's not the punch. She can
Okay.
still fight.
She
She
can
loses
still punch
her,
people. Okay.
Yeah, she loses her free point of will, and she loses her cause terror and cause -1 to terror.
It's like a late game, like last push.
Yeah.
Like one or two like rounds left.
I think it's great. I know it's going to be very situational and it's a risky thing to do, but if you could get someone out of fate and they still have 3 wounds, they just is it D3 wounds or is it just they die?
It's D3 because
D3
it's channeled.
Oh, so it's okay. So it's not just insta dead. All right. So then you're taking a risk there, obviously. God, I wish they would have made that just insta kill personally, because I think that's I don't know.
The Balrog would disagree, but
Yeah.
But all right. So
and Sauron.
So maybe if someone has like 2 or less wounds, maybe if they had 3, you'd go for a last ditch kind of hope to kill them. But I think it's a good little rule to have in case you really needed it.
Yeah, I mean another one would be is if somebody's only got like 2 fate on their Witch King or something like that, and you just wanted to kind of take the. I mean, like if somebody brought like one of these like 1 fate or 2 fate Witch Kings, but it dumped like 15 points of will into them, and Galadriel's like, well, maybe this is worth it.
Yeah,
maybe this will work.
I think in some instances it will be just a math thing where either the hero has very low wounds or you've whittled it down in some way, and it's got maybe Fortify Spirit on it or something like that, and it's an expensive hero, and you just go, all right, I'm fine with you losing my magical powers for the rest of the game. I'm just going to do this banishment special rule and guarantee that I am just killing this hero, which is more valuable than Lady of Light is. And And obviously, it's a big trade-off because you're losing your Fortify Spirit. But if you don't need your Fortify Spirit, then I mean, go for it.
Yeah. Or if you can
Right.
shoot a couple wounds off Gullivar, or Sorcerer's Blast a couple wounds off Gullivar, and he's only got 2 left, it may well be worth it to exhaust Galadriel to take him out.
Yeah.
So what I want to, before we wrap this one up and go on to the next legend, Matt, I know you want to talk about how it played, but I also, when you're done speaking about how it plays, I want you to talk about how you would possibly deal with this in beating it to win the scenario.
Okay, so yeah, as far as how this plays,
Real quick though, guys, I
Yeah.
think I have to get going because I got to get ready for work.
Okay.
All right, so I'll see you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So I mean, as far as how it plays, it is, I mean, it's a very fun list to play. It's very complicated to play because there's just a lot of moving parts. And I mean, I was playing this against a list that had no magic. I would imagine that the complications grow exponentially against a list that has magic. But I mean, they do say this is a list that wants to fight together, and it clearly does. The problem comes when you fight a scenario, and I mean, we're playing Destroy the Supplies. This is one of these scenarios that really kind of forces you to split up, because that's a problem. And the way I solve this problem is I just basically ignored it and said, I'm going to fight together regardless until I can kind of kill enough stuff, and then I'll go after the supplies and hope I can do this quick enough. And was able to do that. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, the way this scenario came out, I destroyed 2 of his supplies. He destroyed 2 of mine. I managed to keep a 3rd one alive just by Saruman kind of reaching back with his 18-inch compel, and then with Sorcerous Blasts to kind of keep people away from it until I could kind of get Radagast back there to basically take his sleigh and sit on it. But the way you beat this army, I think, is the same way you actually beat the Champion's Chariot. Is the last thing you want to do is fight this army. It's still at the end of the day a 5-figure army, and you got to try and win the scenario some other way by you know, splitting yourself off and kind of taking the rest of the objectives, running around it and reconnoiter. This is not a list I think you want to play. This is yet another list you do not want to play Contest of Champions against. Because you're going to find your champion is going to get shut down very quickly. But you know, this is a list where you want to play geographically. You want to split your army up and basically force these 5 guys to go off, and you know, you split your army up into like 2 or 3 parts, and whichever one he goes after with his 5 runs away, and the other 2 try and accomplish something to win the scenario. I think that's how you have to play it.
So what I would ask, though, is let's say the group attacks 1/3, they kill it, then they move on to the 2nd third, they kill it. Does that not create the problem where you're essentially just almost not allowing to move around the board? So like, let's say it was one of the scenarios where you have 6 or 5 objectives you have to get to. So you divide it into 5 groups, and then they go one by one by one, and then they try to take over the last 2 and then just win it by that. Is that not a worrying thing to think about?
Well, remember, each one of the groups of your groups can run away as fast as these guys can pursue them.
Yeah.
Because this is a list that moves 6 inches.
They have no march.
They have no
Except
march.
for the sleigh, which is very easy to kill.
So you think it's more of like a
because you can't
timeout
heroic
thing?
defense your horse. Yeah, if I were to play against this list with a list that I wasn't confident in being able to charge in and grind it out, I would just run away the entire game. And it wouldn't be fun for the person I was playing against. It wouldn't be particularly fun for me, but I would know it would be less fun for me if I charged my troops in, failed all of my courage tests, and got absolutely murdered. So in any objective game, I think if your opponent knows what to do, they will be able to beat this list, unless the White Council player is a combination of very lucky and very skilled.
I mean, I will say this, although this list does move 6 inches a turn, it does have a large number of ways to pull people toward it. So I think I think it is harder to kind of evade this list than it would otherwise be, but it's not impossible. And I think it actually would be kind of an interest. I think if you are a person who if you're a person who just wants to kind of go in and fight stuff, this is not the list to play or to play against. If you are a person who likes kind of a good kind of strategic and tactical think about where stuff needs to move on the table, how can I like grab stuff and use heroic combats to get my guys into combat with the enemy, I think this is going to produce some interesting games.
So I think there are also some aspects of the list that will make it very hard for especially newer players to win objective scenarios with it. And that's the amount of thinking time required to order your spells in the proper way and to cast all of your spells. Because casting spells and resisting spells takes a while to resolve, especially when you need to sit down and think about, okay, this guy needs to go first, then this guy needs to go, then this guy needs to go. And unless your opponent just completely just charges into you immediately, I can't see you killing a large portion of your opponent's army with this list. And I think then your opponent will just outnumber you on the objectives and win.
Okay. I think a lot of people are going to want to play this when they go to the next game, or maybe even as a trial game. Looks like a lot of fun to play as, but like you said, it's a very synergistic.
There you go.
I meant synergistic list where it definitely requires a lot of thought. So definitely keep that in mind if you do decide to play it. It is a very tactical type of list. We're going to move on to the next one. This is my personal favorite of the list. It is the Pits of Dol Guldur. So you can have Azog and the White Warg. That is it. There's no heavy armor. There's no flail. The Keeper of the Dungeons, Gundabad Orc Captains. They have the option for shield. Hunter Orc Captains. They have the option for Fell Warg, Orc Bow, or two-handed pick. Rain the Broken. I guess if you want to. Gundabad Orc Warriors and Hunter Orcs and Fell Wargs. So a good little mixture of warriors. You can choose to do whatever you would like with that. There's only one additional rule. The force must include Azog, who's always the army's leader. The first rule is surprise attack. Once per game, before priority is determined, so long as he is alive and on the battlefield, Azog can declare that he is using this ability. If he does so, do not roll for priority. Instead, Azog's controlling player will automatically win priority roll. Additionally, enemy models may not declare heroic moves in the following move phase. He gets a plant here that cannot be countered. I think this is incredible. We talk about those key move offs once in a while, and for him to basically say, I am winning this, guaranteed, there's nothing you can do about it, I think is just a little bit of an underrated rule that will go unlooked. Because for him to just basically say, I am going to do exactly what I plan on doing, and there's literally no counter, must be very frustrating for the opponent to go against. Magical Void. Friendly models gain resistant to magic special roll. This is the best ability by far. Everything gets resistant to magic, which includes warriors. So that's a little underrated little thing right there in case you wanted to cast out a warrior to compel him in. Fury of the Pale Orc. Azog may declare a heroic combat each turn without spending might. Again, he has 6 might with the warg, a free heroic combat, and him being fight 7, even at strength 5, he is going to destroy things. This is my favorite by far. I always like playing evil armies, and I like playing big tier evil heroes. So your Witch Kings, your Saurons, your Azogs. But the problem with most people, I think, would agree with Azog is he had no counter to magic. Now he does. And I'm not saying it's a complete counter, but he has the ability to really go against magic and stop it and really attack people. And with him being able to take Hunter Orcs with this as well, you can spam those out with the Keeper of the Dungeons being that secondary hero who does a decent amount of damage as well. But what are your guys' thoughts on the list?
So I have played this list before once yesterday against the same person that Dad played against. And I noticed a couple things about it, and I'm sure none of them are really going to be surprising. First off, the list relies almost entirely on Azog to do the hero killing, to kill a bunch of troops. So this is going to be sort of an all or nothing list. If your opponent has ways of dealing with Azog, they will win the game. If your opponent cannot deal with Azog, then they will lose the game. That's how it's going to go. The resistance to magic is nice, though my opponent didn't have any magic, so it didn't exactly come into play in that particular situation. It's not going to be overly useful on your warriors, but it's not bad. Obviously, the big thing with the resistance to magic is it is on Azog, which will, I wouldn't say drastically, but will definitely improve his ability to deal with magic and will make him much harder to deal with in general, especially with the fact that he can call free heroic combats. And for that game, when I played him, he started the game with 6 might and he ended the game with 6 might. So he definitely has might spare to be able to might up his resist rolls and stop those spells from going through.
Well, you were playing Lords of Battle too.
Yes, though I only got a grand total of 1 might for free from that one because I didn't use any might to kill the other heroes. But in the end, Azog did very well in that game. It was against fiefdoms. He managed to kill Forlong, a captain, Angbor the Fearless, and Imrahil, and about 6 warriors. So he obviously did quite a lot. These 2 rules, Magical Void and Fury of the Pale Orc, I find him very comparable to Elendil, because he has similar power. Obviously, Elendil has the +1, but Azog makes up for that by being able to wound all heroes on 3s. They both have free heroic combats. Elendil is slightly more resistant to magic because he gets 2 free will points instead of 1. And Azog is slightly better in the sense because he's got a warg, well, a horse or warg model in general that doesn't die just to 1 Legolas shot or anything like that. And he's got 6 might. Though this is sort of counteracted in turn by Azog being inherently overcosted. I know a lot of people complain about him being too good, but really a lot of his cost in game goes towards the Master of Battle. And remember, the Master of Battle isn't in this list. It's replaced by the Heroic Combat, which I think is either slightly better or roughly about the same points. So I think really the big thing you get from this list is the surprise attack special rule, which can be both used offensively and defensively. For example, if Azog is sitting out in the middle of nowhere and he's under threat from heroic moves and getting swamped, then you can use that to get him out of that situation. And it basically leaves your opponents in just absolute terror of him, because if they leave any hero exposed, you can just say, all right, I am going to take priority this turn. I'm going to charge that hero and kill that hero, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. So I think surprise attack is really what makes this list special.
This is the bane of cavalry armies.
Yes. Just 1 turn, you can just say, all right, I'm going to go first. I'm going to kill all of your cavalry models.
My 2 attack hunter orcs with spear support from Gundabad are going to be charging all your cavalry models who only have 1 attack back.
Yeah.
Have fun with that.
It's not going to be enjoyable for that. So I think this list is probably going to do very well against most armies and then get absolutely murdered by army lists like Angmar and Corsairs. Army lists with Mass Fight 4 are going to be problematic, especially ones with big banner effects. Armies with Mass Terror are going to be problematic because the only way to counteract that is a Warhorn, and Warhorns are 30
Although
points.
I will point out, Fiefdoms is a list with Mass Fight 4, and you're able to have Azog take it apart with this.
That is true, though I think perhaps my opponent could have played better in the sense that they could have played more conservatively with their heroes, so I couldn't just like eat them up every single turn. But that is true. Having fight 4 and a big banner effect isn't the end all be all. But
Yeah,
I think
I mean-
shooting is going to be problematic. A ton of magic is going to be problematic as well, because despite the fact you have the resistant to magic special rule, there's no alternative threats to draw magic away from Azog. Your opponent can be pretty confident just casting spells on Azog and then just not really caring about casting spells on the rest of the list. Because sure, the Keeper of the Dungeons isn't bad, but he's not going to be doing substantial damage. So I think this list could do very well in the right hands, but it's got a couple of crippling weaknesses that
I don't know if I don't know if I would call the weaknesses crippling. I agree with you that there are weaknesses. I'm not sure that they're crippling.
I think
but-
this would really. I think he said it right. Corsairs would love to go against this.
I'm not actually sure Corsairs would.
No.
It depends on the scenario. If it's a scenario where the Corsairs can bring their crossbows to bear on these guys during an approach march, then okay, yeah. But the fact that the Corsairs are going to die every time they lose a fight against this list, and Azog is going to be killing at least 4 of them a turn because none of their heroes can stand up.
They don't
All of their
have
heroes will
to,
run
though.
in terror from.
You can just shoot into Azog's combat and eventually kill him.
Well,
He's defense 5.
yes and no. I mean, having now gone through a tournament with the Corsairs and played a few other games with the Corsairs, it is if Azog's out on his own fighting one set of guys, then you can do that. If Azog's in the middle of a battle line coming together, that becomes much harder to do. Because he can charge 2 guys. You got to kill 2 of them. I got to say, throughout that tournament, I can't think of a single time where I was able to, charge a guy into, a hero and then shoot out my guy so that guy couldn't heroic combat. It turned out to be much harder to do when they were kind of in the middle of a battle line because you just can't get quite as many shots. But anyway, which is not to say that, the Corsairs wouldn't give this list a run for their money, but I think this list would have a decent shot against Corsairs. I agree with you though that what this list really fears is shooting at a distance because it's got some problems closing.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, one more thing to cover is the lack of armor on Azog. So if
Yes.
Azog botches a combat, he can die very easily.
Does he get the thing where he can take like fate from the war? That he has that right?
Yes,
He does. The warg's got
3
1 fate.
wounds, 2 fate.
Okay.
Yep.
And so if he is fighting another hero and the hero has might left and he's got maybe a couple of friends in there, Azog can very, very easily die, especially if the other hero is strength 5 or higher. So you need to be careful when using Azog to kill heroes in this list. Usually you can just throw Azog in and say, okay, I'm defense 7. If they somehow win the fight against me, I can take this damage that they're dishing out. But in this army, you need to be very tricky about when you use Azog to engage opponents' powerful heroes, because you can get to a point where you're going down to a 50-50 roll-off to see if Azog dies or not. And if Azog dies, you're going to struggle to win the game. So it's something to keep in mind. Tim, you're muted.
Sorry. besides the fact that Azog is vulnerable, I think what's great is you can take a lot of models like Hunt Orcs to go with it because they're 8 points a pop, and because the keeper is 75 points, and even though he's probably, what was he, 215, 210, 215 total with the ward, so it just becomes one of those things. Let's see, what is he? He is 215. All right, so he's 215 points. You add the keeper 290, then you add one more captain for 45, so 335, and then you add the troops. I mean, you could get a lot of troops at that point, along with having decent heroes. So I'm a big fan of this Legion.
I'm just curious, Evan, how big was your army that you played?
So this was 850 points. It was 48 models. It had a banner and a war horn, roughly a 50-50 split of Hunter Orcs and Gundabad Orcs, 2 captains, the Keeper and Azog. So especially at higher points, it can get to decent numbers. I think the sweet spot is roughly around 750, 800 points. Going lower will cut into your numbers. And once you start cutting into your numbers, you're going to start having problems because your guys will disappear quickly. Because even though I killed a lot of my opponent's heroes, I still lost a substantial portion of my army just with my Hunter Orcs losing fights and dying. So it's definitely something you need to be careful of.
Though I guess the counter argument would be at lower points, you're less likely to run into something that can shut down Azog.
That's true. Yep.
Yeah, but you don't necessarily need to shut down Azog at lower points because you can just kill the rest of the army.
Well, I think query whether at lower points you want to do the Gundabad Orcs rather than the Hunter. Increase the proportion of the Defense 6 Gundabads as opposed to the Hunter Orcs. So they're like, yeah, I'm not going to kill as often, but I'm going to die a lot less often.
I actually think
would probably be the way to do it.
I think the sweet spot for this is 500, because at that point you take the keeper with Azog, so you're allowed to get 30 models, and then those two combined are 290, and then you could take 2 warbands of Gundabads or of Hunter Orcs and then fill in the rest. So you probably get like close to 27, 28 Hunter Orcs with Azog and the keeper. I mean, at 500 points, that's going to be very difficult to deal with. But we'll move into the last one, which is the Rise of the Necromancer. This obviously has the Necromancer, it has the Nazgul of Dol Guldur, Keeper of the Dungeons, and Castellans of Dol Guldur, and they can take a Morgul Blade for 5 points if they'd like. The additional rules must include the Necromancer, and he's always the army's leader, and it's always deployed as a single warband. The first special rule is whenever the Necromancer attempts to cast a magical power by expending 1 or more will points, he automatically adds an extra free will point to the casting. I think
we know what that one is.
Yeah, we've already seen that one. Power of the Necromancer: friendly models gain the resistant to magic special rule. Additionally, the Necromancer can attempt to cast 2 magical powers each turn rather than 1. However, he may not attempt to cast the same magical power twice or target the same model twice. Pretty good. I mean, he had the 2 thing, didn't he have the 2 magical power before as well? But he didn't have. Why do I feel like I saw that before? Maybe it was a mock draft someone made.
I think it was in one of the scenarios, maybe.
Maybe that's what it is. So 2 magical powers, the same thing as Saruman. That's always great. But again, with him having relying on his will.
Well, the same thing as Saruman from the Vanquishers,
from the Vanquishers,
Necromancer, Legendary Legion.
So, but even though he has 25 will, which obviously is a very large amount of will, he relies on his will to stay alive. So you just have to be careful with that. And the final one, the Dark Lord returns. The Necromancer of Dol Guldur increases his attacks characteristics to 2 when part of this Legendary Legion. I wish they made that 3. That's my personal opinion. I think if he had 3, it'd be much more likely to throw him into combat and then kind of get away with that. But I think they should have made it 3. But what are your guys' thoughts on the Legion? I'll go to you first, Matt.
I think 3 would have made him unstoppable. Except maybe by the Vanquishers of the Necromancer Legendary Legion. I mean, I don't know. I guess I haven't thought through this just because this probably is the list that has the fewest changes to it, to just kind of taking it normally. I mean,
Yeah, there's
basically
not many.
what you get out of this list is he gets to cast an extra spell a turn and he gets an extra attack.
And resistant to magic.
And resistant to magic, right? Which I think will improve. I mean, they'll improve the list a bit, but I mean, the problem that this loadout had was not, kind of killing heroes and not necessarily against magic, because these guys always came back, but was against just, kind of the swarms of opponents that would just kind of take this list down with sheer numbers. And I'm not sure any of these changes change that about the list. That a bunch of dwarves are still gonna kind of give this list the same types of fits as they did before. But I don't know. Evan, what's your thought on this?
So I think increasing the Necromancer's attacks to 2, while it does seem like a good change, because obviously having 1 attack on your leader is bad, I don't think it will change his playstyle overly much. Because what he really wants to be doing is using 1 dice every single turn to cast 2 magical powers and then being able to re-roll it. And he just does that every single turn without fail. He has 25 will, so you don't want him losing will in combat. So you're only going to charge him into combat when you transfix or compel a hero and you're going to be able to kill it. I think the powerful rule here is the ability to cast 2 magical powers, because you can sort of shut down those heroes that are able to take down the ring rates better. But other than that, I don't think there's a lot of changes to this list compared to the Legendary Legion, but it's nice to have it.
Well, so you'd still have to use 2 will to cast 2 spells, because you can cast 2 magical powers rather than 1. Yeah. So you're essentially using 2 will a turn if you want to cast 2 magical powers. Even though it's great to do that, you're going down 2 a turn, and if you did get into combat, you're down 3 in 1 turn. So, do you think they maybe should have made it a free will, or do you think that's too much?
Well, I mean, he already gets a free will from the others.
Well, I'm saying, like, yes,
he gets a lot of free wills.
Yeah,
actually.
I worry with him, because obviously that he has the what is, if you do 800, is it all 9 of them plus him? Then the keeper is with
the 9 plus him and the keeper is 1,000.
At 1,000. Okay, so you'd get at 800, which is very common, at least for us. You would get
you drop the keeper, Kamul, and another wraith. I assume that
so 7 wraiths plus him. So, yeah. I mean,
you could also play a game where you drop down to 6 wraiths, and I think you can get 2 castellans.
I mean, the whole value behind the list is that all of your Necromancer shields never go away, and castellans, while being moderately tanky, sort of give a weakness to the army, give something that the opponent can exploit and kill. So I was reading,
but 2 of them's not going to do. I mean, it's not like you're going to break the army if you kill 2 castellans. And by the way, killing castellans is not easy.
Well, I mean, any big hero can eliminate them fairly quickly, but I understand what you're saying. I think it's just a mistake to take non-ring wraiths in this list just because of the way it plays. And as someone who has used this list before, though it was in the previous edition, whenever you took the keeper, he would immediately die every single game. And I think the castellans would survive for longer, but they would die, and then you'd be even more strained with your remaining wraiths to be able to protect the Necromancer, because this list is all about protecting the Necromancer. And if you can't protect the Necromancer and he dies, then your wraiths start dying. So I think you want to just max out on ring wraiths and leave the Keeper of the Dungeons at home and only run Castellans once you've ran out of Nazgul of Dol Guldur to take. Or
I guess,
maybe replace Kamul because he sucks.
I guess the advantage of the Castellans is that they can act as shields for the Necromancer in a way that they can't be kind of easily heroic combated through. Because that's the problem with using the wraiths to shield the Necromancer is a hero can come into one of these wraiths.
So I think an interesting thing with that is the wraiths have heroic strike due to the FAQs.
Mhm.
So what they can do is if a hero wants to call heroic combat against them, they can strike up and say, you might just be wasting this might. And while it is true that their might is valuable to be able to survive, as long as your opponent doesn't have elven blades, you only need 1 might point really to be able to keep yourself alive.
Well, I mean, the way you do it, right, is you send 2 heroes into one of the ring wraiths. One hero combats, the other strikes up. It's the one that strikes up is the one that's going to go into the Necromancer, at least as long as he can get like to strike 8. And I think that's how you kind of blow through one of these raids, because you've only got a limited number of them, so you have to kind of be putting them in positions where 2 guys can get on one wraith. And I mean, that is one of the, I mean, I'm not saying you should definitely do this, but it's something to consider is having 2 Castellans who just walk around next to the Necromancer, and then you put them less than a base width apart, so you could still probably wrap one guy around into the Necromancer, but at least those 2 guys, if somebody goes into them, they are not going to get, I mean, until it's later on in the game when they've blown a bunch of their will away, those guys are not going to get heroic combated through. Because even if you go into them and do 3 wounds, they can take 3 wounds.
Remember, Castellans are defense 6 now. They're not defense 7. So if you have strength 4 and +1 to wound with a hero, you can easily do 4 wounds to them. And remember that whole strategy of charging 2 heroes in and calling that combat?
Yeah, you can do that.
Especially seeing as 1, you're losing will points for being in combat, and 2, remember those will points do not equate to wounds. Sometimes you can just botch a whole bunch of fate rolls and just die instantly. I've had that happen a lot with my Castellans when I use them, which to be fair is rare, but I've had them just get charged, heroic combated off of, and then killed.
But you get 2 of them for the price of 1 wraith. So
that's true. I have also lost 2 Castellans in 1 turn to heroes, and that's just 80, 90 points down the drain for absolutely nothing.
Were they full will at the time?
They were pretty close.
All right.
I think it's just I'm not saying don't take the Castellans because I think they do have a place, but seriously consider just taking all of the ring wraiths instead.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I'm not saying that you should not do that if you have the points, but I don't know. I think the Castellans are an option here that you should think about, of taking 2 Castellans. I mean, especially if you're at a points value of this, where if you just take wraiths, you're going to have points left over.
Mm-hmm.
You may want to think about taking some Castellans, perhaps with Morgul blades, in place of that, just to make up those extra points.
Well,
because there are a few points levels where that happens.
I just did the math, and I'm not saying you do this, but it is an interesting thing to think about, which is if you did an 800-point list with this and you took the Necromancer, you could get 13 Castellans compared to 7 ring wraiths.
I've played this sort of list before. It's not great.
No?
I've actually used a list with the Necromancer and just a bunch of Castellans, and the whole point of the ring wraiths is that they grind. Castellans cannot grind just by the fact that they run out of will points. in a sustained battle. Especially, and there's no way they can deal with heroes, because another great thing about the wraiths is that if a hero tries to take advantage of them by trying to get a heroic combat off to kill a whole bunch of them, they can strike up and really threaten that hero. Castellans have no might. They have no way to deal with that. So I think it's possible to take mass Castellans. I just don't think it's the most effective.
I just thought about that because it was like you get almost double the amount of models at that point, and they still have, in theory, 12 turns of combat if nothing went wrong for them. So let's assume things do go wrong for them. They probably have 6 or 7 turns, and you'd have 13 of them. So just a thought. But either way.
I also have tried this, by the way, with similar results, which is that if your entire army is Castellans, you'll be amazed at how quickly they will burn through their will. I mean, I think the way to use Castellans is just to have a couple of them, and you use them as like, all right, so if this is a guy that I need to go in and make sure that gets tanked for a couple turns, that's what you send the Castellans into, and they just, basically, stop that guy in their tracks. What they're great for is they're great for just checking captains. You can put a Castellan into like somebody else's captain and know that captain is going to be tied up for.
I mean, you can put a Castellan into somebody's captain and be pretty dang sure that Castellan can kill that captain.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, fight 5, strength 5, unless you've got like an elf captain or something, even if you've got an elf captain, the Castellans are going to be doing a ton of damage, especially if they have a Morgul blade, which can cut through those 2 wounds.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. As always, leave any lists you have for further episodes and any ideas you'd like for us to discuss in the future as well. As always, we're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and then check out our Facebook group if you're interested there. We kind of post a couple our videos and then maybe some new stuff that's coming out for us as well. But everyone have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody. Happy Halloween.